To Nature's Wild Playground, and today we are going to be talking about attracting solitary bees. I am not sponsored by this company. I got this magazine a couple months ago and really enjoyed this article, so I wanted to share it with you. Maybe you'll learn something from it too. Solitary bees are quickly becoming the new bee to host in our yard. One of Mother Nature's best pollinators. They're gentle, easy to care for, and critical pollinators for food and ecosystem. Unlike social honeybee, solitary bees live and work alone, and they also don't make honey. They forage for their own food and find their own nests, and all females lay their own eggs. Solitary bees make up for the largest percentage of bee population. Out of the more than 20,000 bee species worldwide, around 90% are solitary. Two popular bees to host in your yard are mason bees and leafcutter bees. About 140 species of mason bees and 242 species of leafcutter bees inhabit North America. Many of them native before honeybees were brought over from Europe. Native bees pollinated the continent, enriching their habitat and helping it grow. Springtime is for mason bees. Mason bees are spring pollinators and emerge from hibernation in early spring when temperatures reach about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. They seek pollen and nectar after their long winter slumber, and they'll stay within 200 to 300 feet from where they emerged for the duration of their life. Mason bees get their name because they use mud for their masonry work when constructing their nests. Their mandibles aren't strong enough to cut wood, so they search for natural holes, such as hollow stems, holes in wood caused by insects, or nesting shelters hung up by gardeners or farmers. Once a female mason bee has found her nesting cavity, she'll seal the end with mud and build a series of chambers that each include an egg, a pollen loaf, and another mud wall to separate the chambers from the others. She'll repeat this about 7 times in each nesting cavity. Each egg will hatch into our larva and consume the pollen loaf. It'll then spin a silky cocoon and form into a pupa. While it hibernates over winter, it grows into an adult bee and then emerges the following spring and repeats its life cycle. A female mason bee will lay about 15 eggs in her lifetime, and both males and females will die 4 to 6 weeks after emerging. One popular type of mason bee that farmers and gardeners are using in the Pacific Northwest is the blue orchard mason bee. Often mistaken for houseflies, they sport a greenish iridescent sheen on their backs and are usually spotted in garden covers and pollen. In the Midwest and on the East Coast, gardeners can host horn-faced mason bees, which have tan and fuzzy bodies. Summers with leaf-cut bees. Leaf-cut bees begin to emerge when temperatures are about consistent to 75 degrees or higher for about a week or two. Like all solitary bees, they 2. Find their own cavity in which to lay their eggs. A female leafcutter bee will lay about 30 eggs in her lifetime, which ranges between about 4 to 6 weeks. She'll start cutting tiny crescent-shaped pieces out of leaves and flower petals. Then she'll fly those pieces back to her nest, where she'll chew them until they become pliable, and then push them up along the walls of the cavity. The female will then lay an egg and leave pollen loaf for her babies before wrapping up the leaf chamber and making a cozy little sleeping bag around the egg. This process can sometimes take her up to 5 hours. The egg will hatch into a larva, which will then consume pollen loaf. Unlike a mason bee, a leafcutter larva doesn't weave a cocoon. Instead, it will overwinter in its sleeping bag and emerge as an adult bee for the following summer. Belly flopping pollinators. Mason and leafcutter bees are incredible pollinators. They have a special way of collecting pollen. They belly flop onto blossoms. Honeybees and bumblebees have pollen baskets called corbicula on their legs, while mason and leafcutter bees have tiny sticky hairs called scopa on their abdomens. When they collect pollen, they belly flop onto the blossom, and the pollen sticks all over their bellies. They carry the pollen to other flowers. This enables them to have 95% pollination rate, compared with honeybees, which have 5% pollination rate. Solitary bees can visit more than 2,000 blossoms a day, which is why they're known as one of the most effective critical pollinators. Mason and leafcutter bees aren't picky. They'll collect pollen and nectar from just about any plant that's blooming. Not only do they help us grow more food, but they also pollinate our native plants. Pollinated trees and plants grow bigger and stronger than unpollinated ones, which in turn strengthens the soil, provides cleaner air, feeds other wildlife, and boosts the overall health of the ecosystem. Solitary bees are easy guests to host in any yard. They are generous return on investment in the maximum pollination. First, decide whether you'd like to create a habitat for the mason bee in the spring or leafcutter bees in the summer, or both. And then gather your materials. Here are some recommended supplies and best practices for successful habitat. Supply food. After solitary bees emerge, they'll be hungry. Talk to your local nursery to learn what blossoms in early spring and summer for your area, or find resources online such as the National Wildlife Federation of Gardening and Pollinating. Providing shelter. Set up a solitary bee house with a roof or cover to protect the nesting material from getting wet. Hang the house in morning sun, insert proper nesting material, and ensure your bees remain healthy all year long. Stacking trays and tubes that can be opened and separated are the best nesting materials for bees. Do not use bamboo, reeds, or holes drilled in wood. Every fall, mason bees' nesting holes are larger than those of leafcuff bees, so make sure you use the correct ones. Offering mud or clay. Mason bees use mud or clay to plug their holes and lay their babies. Dig a hole about 50 feet away from their nest. Stir in a mixture of mud and clay. Make sure it remains damp throughout the season. Don't use pesticides. Weed killers and pesticides can harm all pollinators. Remember that mason bees build with mud to house their babies, so any pesticides can kill developing larvae. You can find many non-toxic gardening tips online for maintaining a beautiful garden without use of pesticides. Or subscribe to the channel. Well, we do organic gardening all year this summer. Clean every fall. This is one of the most important steps in hosting your own solitary bees. You must harvest and clean mason bee cocoons and sterilize their nesting blocks every fall to remove predators. Bamboo, reeds, or holes drilled into wood can't be opened and cleaned at the end of the season, which means mold, fungus, and predators such as flies and pollen mites could wipe out your solitary bees. Many people like to host their own mason bees in their backyard. However, if you want the benefit of pollination without a hassle of cleaning the cocoon and sterilizing nesting blocks, you can rent your own bees from Rent Mason Bees, and they'll provide you with everything you need to host and pollinate your yard, including cleaning and hibernating services. When solitary bees show up, success literally blooms all around. With a little research and preparation, you can build bountiful pollination and a healthy ecosystem to your property. Not to mention some of the fun for you and your family by providing a home for these valuable bees. Alright, so this is structure that they're referring to for their housing. Now I'll go back a page. Okay, this is a solitary bee collect pollen on their abdomens. Oop. This one right here. And then we have leaf cutter. Bees use cut leaves and flowers to construct their nests. Right here on this page. Now if we go back to this page here, we have mason bees are a type of solitary bee with no hive or queen to protect. The blue orchid mason bee is popular in the Pacific Northwest. So this is the orchid bee. and then you have your solitary, or mason bees, sorry. So I found that article very helpful and interesting. And of course you have your baby bees down here on the bottom. So don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching today.